need to address while we are all sitting at home and we are struggling to get our cash in place. And this afternoon, and I'm very happy to have a chance to share with you the learnings that we're learning from our fight against the pandemic here in China. This is, of course, a very unfortunate crisis that very little people, if any, actually had anticipated before its outbreak. But when it came very fast, and China had to fight for it almost by itself for several months. And then, unfortunately, the virus also, spread over to other parts of the world, and now I understand also to India, but also to many other countries. So the experience that China has gone through in fighting this virus in the last couple of months is really worth many people to really examine and to really see, what's good and what's not so good. And in particular, from the standpoint of, leading companies, perhaps in the startup stage, and also being venture capital investors into startups. What can we learn from what China has gone through? And in particular, for India, what are the experiences that, we can pick up, and perhaps there are ways that we don't need to repeat some of the mistakes that China has gone through, but also perhaps in some cases where China has done well, we can learn from it. So when Mahendra asked me to give a sort of a opening sort of presentation, I put together a few slides. It's only 5 slides, so I hope to take you through very quickly. But I want to deliver a couple of messages. Job to arrest the virus, and it's still not entirely over, but the job has been pretty effective. But it requires a lot of resources. And deployment in many parts of the society in China. Secondly, is that in fact, while of course the economy has been hit pretty hard due to the crisis, there are also some silver linings. There are sectors where we're seeing a very accelerated growth during this period, and I want to share with you our observations on the ground. But of course, the other panelists will also share their hands-on experience as well. So just bear with me a little bit. I'll take you through these slides in about 10 minutes or so. Next slide. So essentially, China had intensively fought the pandemic over the last several months, really since January, and now we're into April. So about 2 to 3 months period. And I think all of you know that China had installed a very stringent lockdown policies across many cities in China, but in particular in the epicenter of the outbreak in Wuhan, which started on the 23rd of January, and it was just released a couple of days ago. It's pretty tough actually, because the whole city was locked down. People were not allowed to go in and out and so on. But in general, from what we know, actually, the Wuhan people were really, fighting against this in a very cohesive manner, albeit in a very difficult time. But the lockdown policy was the driver for arresting the pandemic in the fast manner. The lockdown is not only at the city level, but the enforcement of the checking happens in local levels and local communities. In Chinese we call it xiaoqu, right? The districts or the housing estates or the little compound that people live in, and all the controls are happening at the borders of.
我估计是血症，我好返回来了，不是100多美金的血症嘛，100年不是3美金的血症，好返我15美金嘛，侬晓得吧？对。
And from very early on, the Chinese government required or encouraged people to wear the face mask, and that has become somewhat of a culture in China now. So everybody still wears the face mask, and currently China still have a very strict policy against the border control. Foreigners, except if they have sort of diplomatic visas and other very specialized visas. Otherwise, the control is very stringent even now. And early on, when the outbreak just started, it was quite chaotic actually in Wuhan and also in the Hebei province in general. And pretty quickly, the leading government officials, the party secretary of the province as well as the party secretary of the city, were both removed and replaced by other people, and so on. So it's a tough battle, and you could see, it was a very top-down method from the government, both the central government as well as the local governments, and it mobilized a lot of resources and very strict and stringent controls. But largely speaking, the measure has been very effective in controlling the pandemic. And right now, if you look at Wuhan, it has been reopened. And from what we know, there's already a lot of traffic in and out. Next picture. So if we look at sort of the data, right, and by now, at least in the English-speaking world, people tend to talk about flatten the curve, right? Flatten the curve as quickly as you could. And we heard a lot that in the West, in America, in Europe, people are saying, we need to flatten the curve like China. And this is really how it happened, or how the data showed. China, of course, had the outbreak first, and there was an upsurge around middle of April, but then the curve came down pretty quickly. And so that's the China story. But if you look at the other curves, in particular America, unfortunately, even though America had from the mid-February to mid-March, sort of in a way to prepare for the pandemic, the preparation wasn't really done that well, and you can see how the curve is accelerating. And as with quite a number of European countries as well, but it looks like, fortunately, some of the curves have been slowing down as well, but not in America. Next page. And when we were talking about this a couple of days ago with Mahendra has reminded us that the audience today, in other words, yourself, are largely from the startups. Therefore, most of you will be SMEs, venture capital investors, of course, who are behind these enterprises. So one of the questions that was raised during our discussion a couple of days ago was, what has been the Chinese government doing in terms of supporting the SMEs, the smaller companies? And so I thought about this and put together this slide. Essentially, of course, at two levels. So one level is the local governments, and on the left-hand side, focus on the second point and the third point. Quite a number of local governments has been providing tax reliefs for SMEs as a way to relieve the short-term financial pain. And the third point is also quite a number of cities have issued what's called consumption vouchers or consumption coupons for consumers. So in addition to other mechanisms as well. So the local government are already doing quite a number of measures in order to help alleviate some of the financial pains of the SMEs. At the central government level, as always, at times of difficulties like this, central government is pretty quick actually in also starting or initializing policies in order to prop up the economy, mostly in the form of fiscal stimulus, in the form of industrial policies, like the third point at the bottom, which which is related to new energy vehicles. There's also another policy that came out on the connected and smart cars. And also, very importantly, the Chinese government is committing a lot of money onto investment. Second point, the form and shape of investment perhaps will evolve quite a bit. Whereas in the past, a lot of investments were going to traditional fixed infrastructure like bridges, tunnels, high-speed rail, and so on. It looks like this time, given evidence of technology and how technology has helped the fight against the pandemic, looks like much of the money will be going to what is now called new infrastructure. And what is new infrastructure is really digital and smart infrastructure, leveraging technology such as 5G, AI, and so on. So the Central government will be and is actually spending a lot of money trying to promote the economy, but mostly through these various dimensions. Next page. So as I mentioned, the pandemic really was disastrous for many people, and many businesses has been hit very hard, including many of the SMEs in China. But there are also a number of areas that we've seen incredible surges in demand during this period, and I think you all know that. But what I've decided to do, I've asked my team to put together some data so you can get a sense of the dimensions of the growth of the surges that we saw during this period. This is not most updated data. I think it's until around the mid or late March. But nonetheless, you can see from the upper left-hand corner, how distributed working methods, all the apps that's related to distributed working methods like TikTok, and other applications like what you're now using, like Zoom, has really have seen an incredible increase on the demand side. And then moving on to the right, of course, still remote education, remote learning. Students could not go to schools, so students have to rely on remote applications such as TikTok to learn. It's quite incredible. But students, as I understand, they don't quite like TikTok because they still have to learn. But nonetheless, it's somewhat required for them now. The other areas that we're seeing a major surge in that demand is actually on in Chinese we call this big health. It's sort of the general health services area, but leveraging on technology through remote diagnostics and so on. Some of the apps like Ping On Good Doctor have also seen an incredible increase in the adoption of the subscribers. On lower left-hand corner, Tencent, even though they're a very huge company, they also benefited quite a bit because when people stay at home, a lot of people would tend to spend their time on mobile games, on playing the mobile games. So Tencent also benefited quite a bit. In the middle, lower row, in the middle, increasingly, there's a lot, because people couldn't get out much, or couldn't get out at all, so they tend to order things online. So online delivery of food and fresh produce become very popular. And finally, and not least, is that of course the online entertainment became very popular. So all the apps that provide for online entertainment, like iQIYI, have also enjoyed incredible growth in this period. So this is not exhaustive, but here are some examples of how some of these sectors actually have, in a way, leveraged this opportunity to grow in a very rapid manner. Next page. And this is my final page, and I'll finish here. Is that we leveraging on what we just presented to you the last page. We would anticipate post the pandemic in China, at least we see that some of the sector will probably continue to see quite a bit of growth. And these are areas that we call big health, logistics, automation, distributed working, entertainment, retail, education, and social media. And just for example, at least I would anticipate the Chinese government will spend incredible amount of money to build the next generation of smart cities in China. China has been investing a lot of money in building smart cities across many cities in China, but the smart cities so far has been quite functional in nature. Functional meaning it was meant for things such as traffic management, facial recognition, motion recognition, and that kind of stuff. This time, when the virus came, actually, it turns out that all this intelligence that was invested into the smart cities before wasn't able to really fully track where people went. For example, right before the lockdown of Wuhan, apparently, according to the mayor of Wuhan at that time, he said something like 5 million people fled Wuhan and went somewhere else. The Chinese government had no way to track where these people went. If you think about this from a public health standpoint, there's a way that actually these 5 million people were able to be tracked through whatever mechanisms, then you actually would be able to isolate the carriers of the virus much earlier, much easier. Of course, it wasn't done. The capabilities was not available, even though an incredible amount of money has been put into smart cities. But of course, everybody, including the Chinese government, recognized the need to improve on the public health agenda. So no longer this is only a narrow definition of a few set of functional agenda. This is a much broader set of agenda that's related to the public management of cities, provinces, and for the matter, the entire country. So, at least I would expect incredible amount of money to upgrade the smart cities intelligence and create much better interconnectivity across different cities, so that in the future the public health agenda would be much better managed. And then the box right below, I mentioned about big health or healthcare. The focus is going to be leveraging technology to develop more early prevention, early detection, more capable treatment remedies, and so on. So again, there will be quite a bit of investment and money we expect to go into this sector. I already talked about quite a bit of business models from offline to online, and I would expect increasing prevalence of what we call OMO model, online merchant with offline model, to create an integrated business model in the areas of retail, education, and remote working, and so on. Big data, of course, will become the backbone to support all this. Without saying, China already have the world's largest big data for right or for wrong, and going forward, I would expect the big data will become even bigger. And also, because of the pandemic, people would try to prevent from having the sort of intimate human-to-human interactions, and there's much more preference for now human-to-machine interactions, so even machine-to-machine interactions. So we expect automation and robotics will take up quite a bit, particularly in logistics, last mile delivery, and also in smart manufacturing. And lastly, I just want to mention that, at least based on my observations, is that while a lot of people, particularly people from the West, has always criticized China as being an authoritarian state, there's little accountability of the government and so on. But in reality, the world is changing very rapidly. The prevalence of social media has been affecting the world, and China is included. And I see that in this time during the pandemic, actually, the social media also play a major role in being a source of reflection of people's opinion and feedback to the government, both at the central government and the local government. Well, not everything was perfect, but we do see the feedback from the government pretty quickly in responding to some of the more recent feedback from the people through the social media. So I would also expect the role of social media would evolve after the pandemic is over. So far, it's very much sort of B2C, to even increasing the 2B. But I believe that in the future, the government potentially also play a much bigger role. So I would expect some G2C and C2G kind of model coming out in the social media. So that's a very quick summary, Mahendra, of the learnings from China so far. And I will stop here. I want to leave enough time for the other panelists to offer their valuable. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Z, for your insights and a very good presentation overall, which could set the pace for this discussions. My questions are I'm going to address it to Leon. Leon, you're there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Dr. Z, just in his, one of his slides, he said that there was a surge in all the sectors like entertainment, gaming, and education, grocery delivery. You coming from a kind of investor perspective, do you see these surges in some sense after lockdown? Because they seem to be particularly the surge happens because there's very stringent lockdowns which were imposed in China. Similar lockdowns we are facing increasingly in India now. So do you think that these surges which we see during the period of the lockdown are sustainable and there's a long-term shift in the consumer's mind?
I think that the peak will not sustain for such a long time, but I think it will definitely change the behavior from the customer, from the consumer, like what it does for SARS in 2003, right? For the online e-commerce, right? So currently, because as you know that, for example, for the online education, a lot of students, they are staying at home and there's no timeline for them to open school. So many of the classes are conducted online. And I think that is the boost to all this kind of education behaviors, either from school, also from the instruction, from the parents of the students. I think that kind of behavior shift, I think will be some fundamental change to impact such kind of sectors. So I think that in future the peak will not sustain, but I think it will enter into another stage, a new stage for those sectors who have positive impact for the coronavirus, like online education, like online grocery delivery, and also as well as what they are using the online site. I think that is my views on those kind of sectors.
Right. And the other thing which I need to ask you is that we see in India that some of the investors are getting very excited about online gaming and education, and they're rushing into making investments. So do you think that it's a good time to look at these opportunities which we believe are currently showing very high aspects, but subsequently when things settle down, things become normal, everyone is going to go back to the usual offline mode of education, and gaming will not have that kind of an excitement as it is because everyone is indoors. So do you think it's a wise thing for some of the investors who are rushing into making these kind of investments? Are you also looking at these investments, or you are sitting back and?
Understood. So from my point of view, I think that because for VC and P investments is actually a long-term investment instead of to buy or sell in the secondary market, right? So I think it will to take into consideration of manufacturers. I think first, as you mentioned, that the kind of world situation will have some positive impact on the those sector, but also you need to take consideration about the sustainability of the specific this model, the target they are currently looking at. And also, I think the most important factor currently facing India is actually for all of the startups. So do you have enough cash to will help you go through the tough time, right? I think you need to have at least more than 6 months cash to burn in the next 6 months, because I think it's not still clear about what's going to happen in India as compared to China. I think currently we can have some kind of conclusion for China that everything will get back to normal in quite near future. But in India, I think we still need 1 or 2 months to see what is the real bottom and when it will bounce back. So I think for most of the VC and private equity firm I'm both working with, I think they are more conservative to make investment currently. I think they are more willing to wait and to really allow the company to test their business model to have enough cash to go through the tough time, and then they will pull the trigger when all of the things get clear. Yeah.
One point which you raised, that you believe that all the startups and early stage ventures which have got funded should have cash reserves or a runway for another about 6 months.
Yeah.
Your portfolio, if you believe that some of these companies will not have enough cash to last out for that period, so would you be supporting them in terms of more bridging kind of investments or some kind of a debt instrument or any other mode of helping them out through this crisis?
Yeah, I think that is a very good question. And I think the first thing we told our portfolio companies that they need to really consider to spend their cash, right? How they will cut down their payrolls to conservatively to spend. And I think that is the first leverage they can do internally, and also I think that is the most rational way for them to go through the tough time. I think purely depending on the backup of the shareholders, I think that is not the most efficient way to do that. But for those companies, we have very confident this model, and we think that they have the ability to go through this tough time. But for some very critical reason that there's some shortage of cash, we will back them, but we don't promise on that, and we also don't want to give them those kind of I think the back road to conduct their business. I think it is the time to test their own abilities to get through those tough times. Yeah.
I fully appreciate that it's tough times for the startups, but at the same time, it's a tough decision on the part of venture capital funds like yours to be able to make up your minds that which one to support, which one not to support.
Yeah, of course.
So, I mean, you, if you want to answer that question, please answer that. If you wish not to answer, my question is that as a percentage of your portfolio, how many of your investments you feel will not survive this crisis?
We will not survive. Hopefully, I think zero.
Zero.
I think 100% of them will survive.
Investors, right? Hopefully that everyone will be able to glide and swim through the tough times. But
yeah, we actually also have a very detailed discussion with each of our portfolio companies, and what is good is that many of them have I think have a sufficient fund to help them to go through the tough time. Yeah, so I think that the situation you have mentioned, the opportunity for us to back for our portfolio portfolio will be limited, and we are happy about that.
I'll go to David now. David, you have been a very successful entrepreneur. You employ more than 800 odd people in your thing. You have listed your company in the New York Stock Exchange, right? You are a large company today, so you definitely don't have the same issues as an early stage startup founder would have. So what would be your advice to the founders at this point of time? As Leon has said, they need to have 6 months runway and they should conserve their cash. So what is the advice you want to give to the young founders in India? That how do you think is a couple of cues you can give them that how can they ride this crisis?
Yeah, I think the quick answer is to manage their cost. I think that is the key to help them to go through the tough time. Yes. Yeah. As long as you can maintain your business, I think you can take everything to cut your cost to help you to survive for those situations. Yeah.
David, you have any views on this?
Sure. So yes, we have we are so around 360. We are a platform. We're connecting 150 million registered users with about 2,000 financial institutions. We have close to 1,000 employees, right? So really the pandemic is really reshaping the way how we live and work. I mean, really in the short term for us, the most important thing really is the safety and the health of our employee, of our customers, of our partners, right? And really, the survival of any institution really is the only agenda for us in the first 3 months. So we can just share with you guys what we have done in the last almost 2.5 to 3 months and now. So we learned the pandemic or the virus end of January. It was right before the big Chinese New Year holidays. So a couple of things we did even before the holidays. We studied the so we have a leadership team. We put together a team from different part of organization. Basically, we figure out what are the plans in terms of how to set up a remote working environment, how to keep the business continuity, how to communicate with our customers, with our financial partners, with our employees. So right before the holiday, we actually started to reconfigure our OA systems, our office, our CIM, our internal CIM system, the OA system, so we can help our employee to work remotely. So we send, for example, laptops directly to their home. We set up our system so they can clock where they are and what's the daily temperature. We started sourcing some basic PPEs, those masks and personal protection equipment. We also work with local authorities, our office space landlord, in terms of how we're able to resume on the business. So that's that's January 25th. So we had about 2 weeks lockdown. So on February 3rd, that's the day the whole country, most of the country started telecommuting, so working from home. So we had a hard time back in February. So, but we did see our business grow, try to recover. It's maybe 10, maybe 20% week over week, but not until around March 16th. That's around 7 weeks after the initial lockdown of the whole country. That's March 16th. Our headquarters in Beijing are allowed to go back to work partially. So we have even as of today, we have around 35% of our people can go on site and start working. But however, we have about 60, maybe 70% of our businesses have resumed. So we did a couple of things. I mean, the first thing, actually very important, especially for startup companies, is really the cash flow management. How to cut your cost rigorously, and sometimes you need to do that very aggressively. So we did a couple of things. Like the first one we did back in January, February, and early March. We actually closed. We actually swapped our high cost office space. We found like office space nearby. It's about half of the cost. So we closed down 2 floors, basically about around 4,000 square meters. We moved folks to the less fancy but convenient office space. So overall, we reduced our rent around 30% of the whole company. And also, another part of our cost is some of the capacity. We do expect some of our capacity, for example, even our servers, our database or servers, the capacity will be less utilized, right? We need less hardware. We are shifting from offline to online. We need more capacity from the cloud. So we basically shut down and also sold some of the redundant hardware capacity and moved to online, the cloud space. So in terms of the optimization of the workforce, those are very hard decisions, very, very hard. We actually did some optimization. We actually figured we'd rather be more aggressive, cutting the office space. As we found out, we are thinking even right now we have half of the floor. If we reduce that or shift to lower cost, we would be able to save another 15, maybe 20 engineers. So that are the cash flow things we have managed. And also the second thing is communications. Keep in mind in Beijing, we still have a 14-day quarantine. Basically, people return to Beijing from a business trip to Shanghai need to be quarantined for 14 days. So we had to make some arrangement, basically send some of our folks to our client side in Jiangsu province in southern China. So they go to remote or like satellite locations and spend 2 weeks there and start serving our customers. So that was the arrangements we have done for that part. So I guess a lot of things, the devil is in the detail because we are fighting against the coronavirus. It's invisible, right? And it's a lot of people are scared. So we do need to proactively prepare for that. Even some of the how to quarantine your office, how to clean your office. So do prepare to acquire masks or PPEs for your office space if you are ready to open your office in a few weeks down the road. But my advice for you guys is prepare for a long fight. The coronavirus is not going to disappear in a couple of months. Even China, in some part of the country, we are worried about the second wave will come back. So I would say it's definitely not going to be a V shape. It's hopefully not a W shape, right? In some area, hopefully will not come back. Even like Hong Kong, we know Hong Kong managed the situation reasonably well, but there was a small second wave come back 2 weeks ago. The government has managed to flatten the curve or lower the number in the last 2 weeks. So for entrepreneurs, for startup companies, so my advice is definitely prepare for long-term fight. So you need prepare for the worst. Even some of the worst situation you haven't seen in India or we haven't seen in China. I guess risks are really the things you're not aware, you're not prepared, and even here in China, or even in Hong Kong, or in Singapore, We have seen in the battle, we have won some of the battle, but it's going to be tough down the road. So I guess India, I hope you guys will open up in a few weeks down the road. But I would definitely think the open up will be more a staggered approach or phased-in approach. Maybe we're facing in some geographic or in some sector or in some part of the businesses. So like what we have found out in China for startup companies, for peers, we have even for our partners. Keep in mind we are working with 1,000 financial institutions in China. So those institutions, those regions, if they are more digitally savvy or they're more digitally capable, they can weather the storm much better. So I can share with you some of the data. Even among in China, we have 33 provinces or regions. One of the province is the Hubei province. The hit hard, right? The province for Q1, the GDP is the whole economy dropped around 98%. But we have another province, which is the Zhejiang province in the eastern China. It's the digital economy thriving. The percentage is very, very high. So overall, Zhejiang's GDP only got hit by 2%. The average for the whole country is around 20%. So keep in mind in China, for example, fintech, like payments. For example, I haven't used renminbi or the cash for a couple of months. People are scared of using cash because even the paper currency may carry the coronavirus. So that's why we see more regions will transfer to a more digital-driven economy, right? And more sectors, healthcare, like food, fresh food delivery, education, even fintech, payments, digital, like online lending, for example. We see more and more banks are pushing for digital, like online decision, real-time decisions, no face-to-face, no face-to-face approval, right? They're pushing for we call no-touch finance. I guess those are the trends. We'll definitely see that in India, in the rest of the world. So I want to just close my part. There was a joke. Who would be the driver of digital transformation? That be the entrepreneurs or the investors or the CEOs or CFOs or the coronavirus? Of course, the answer will be coronavirus probably will be the most drivers pushing for digital transformation. We'll do a better job than the investors and your CFO CEOs.
All right. I think any adverse circumstances actually do create opportunities. So I think very good advice to the founders. I think going to Peifu, David ended his thing that there will be an opportunity in digital payments and fintech. You have a startup, Carbon, which actually is giving credit cards to startups. You have access to data, right? I'm not going to ask you questions on your data, but just for the sake of the participants, you have access on the cash situation of many of the startups in India. So do you think that, as Leon said, as David said, do you think that the startup ecosystem in India has enough cash to be able to sustain itself for the next 3 to 6 months?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mahendra, for the question. I'll first do a small introduction of what we do first, and then I think that will give people the better context of where we're coming from.
Yes.
So basically, Carbon Card is a fintech that issues corporate credit cards to startups. As you understand, in India, and actually anywhere in the world, companies, especially startups, need these cards to pay for expenses, like AWS, like Google, like Zoom, like right now, or Zendesk, various expenses, right? So they need these corporate credit cards. But it's actually very, very difficult to apply for corporate credit cards from banks, because they ask for personal guarantees, they ask for fixed deposits, they ask for board resolutions, shareholders lists, and a whole bunch of documents. So it's actually quite difficult for startups to have corporate credit cards. So what do? They actually use their personal credit cards to pay for the expenses first, and then later at the end of the month, reimburse from the company. And that is something that we don't think makes sense because it is a corporate expense. Therefore, there should be a corporate card to pay for it. So basically, Carbon issues corporate credit cards without a need of personal guarantee, without a need of fixed deposits, and it can be applied in 10 minutes. We issue you a card in 24 hours. Plus, it's all entirely free because there's no interest fee, there's no processing fees, because we make money from the interchange, meaning from the merchants. And just to give you more context, we now serve more than 300 startups in India, in both B2C, in B2B, early stage ones and late stage ones. So yes, we do see what's happened with their spending. And I think just to trace back a little bit about what happened with the spending patterns of our customers since COVID. Let's say by the beginning of March, people were starting to work from home. So the first half of March, travel was cut entirely. It used to be about 40% almost, say back in January and in December, 40% of a company's expenses were in travel. But by early March, all companies cut that down for travel. The second half of March, people actually stopped spending because when the news of the 21-day lockdown arrived, companies were scrambling to prepare for business continuity, and so they were too busy thinking about spending. They're busy, say, optimizing, laying people off, etc., right? So after about 2 weeks of optimization, since the beginning of April, these companies are starting to spend. And the ones that they spend on are mostly for these collaboration tools like Zoom, like Slack, like Zendesk, like Freshworks, etc. Right? That's one type of spend that they've been spending on. The other type of spend is actually marketing. So on Facebook, on Google, on LinkedIn. And the ones that are still spending on marketing are the ones that Dr. Edward mentioned earlier. The ones, say, doing gaming, the companies in online education, in entertainment. And I think one interesting insight here is that the gaming companies are actually taking this as an opportunity to grow 10 times because they realize that the CAC, the cost of acquisition has actually declined significantly. Because prior to the COVID, the big spenders for advertising were e-commerce, fintech, especially lending, and gaming. Basically, I would say these are the three giants of paying for advertisements. But because of COVID, e-commerce has stopped spending on advertising. So has the fintech companies. Therefore, it is really just a gaming and some online education companies that are paying for Google, paying to Facebook, and so the CAC declines significantly. And at the same time, the value able to generate from the customers has increased because people are spending time at home, and therefore they have more time to play games, to do remote learning, etc. Right? So for these industries, they've actually increased spending because it is time for them to grow. Now, I think, but back to your question, whereas do I see whether there's enough cash for companies to last, say, 3 to 6 months in India? And I would say, honestly, it is not from our current visibility of what our startups are spending money on and not spending money on, but it's more from my, say, previous years as a venture capitalist from China investing in India. And one major difference between the Chinese startups and the Indian startups is that I think Indian startups are much more resilient in terms of runway because they realize that there are not as many VCs in the market to back them up. And so since day one, many Indian startups that I know are extremely cautious in terms of spending, scaling, and burning cash. So compared to the Chinese counterparts whom have access to a larger pool of capital of VCs or investors, I would say overall the Indian startups DNA has been relatively conservative compared to Chinese startups, and so I think for sure these Indian startups have enough cash to last more than 6 months. That is not something that I think is an issue, and people have always said that in India, if you don't have runway of 10 months, because sometimes it takes like as long as 4 to 6 months to fundraise and get around in, you will be in trouble. And so I think that I'll say environment that the Indian startups have been operating under, which is, for lack of a better word, a shallower capital pool, has actually built in that resilient DNA in the entrepreneurs and founders to ensure that they do have a long runway, to ensure that they do operate in an optimized manner. So back again to your question, I think definitely, I think the Indian startups are very resilient, and I'm certain that they will last far longer than 6 months.
Thanks. Before, I think what I see from you is you rightly said that the domestic venture capital pool is very shallow and the access to capital is limited as compared to China. So, Leon, both Leon and you with your previous venture capital experience, would the Chinese VC funds who were looking to come to India, and some of you like Leon who have been active in India, do you see this as an opportunity to start investing and bringing large pools of capital from China into investing in early stage ventures in India?
Yeah, sure. Of course, we think that it's going to be a very good opportunity for us to reevaluate those target companies. But I think the obstacle is that we cannot travel to India, right? We cannot do the due diligence as long as all of this lockdown passed away. Yeah.
So I think,
but definitely, I think it's going to be good opportunities for all of this. Not only the investor from China, I think globally to reevaluate some very good target in India. Yeah.
So do you think it's a good opportunity for domestic or Indian venture capital funds to be able to raise money?
Actually, I'm not quite sure, because I think that the risk appetite of all of this fund, I think they are more conservative given the uncertainty about the global situation caused by the virus. And I think they're more willing to invest in some kind of fixed income asset instead of equity. Yeah. I think that as long as, at least for this year, I think it will be a little bit hard.
How are your limited partners or your own investors reacting to this situation? Are they going to be honoring the commitments made to you, or have you heard from your LPs that they want you to?
Yeah. Okay. So because most of our limited partners is coming from China, so I think the situation is not quite the same for those VC fund, the local VC fund in India. Yeah, so for our local LPs, I think because the situation is getting back in China, I think they are more confident to conduct their equity investment. But for the other global investors, I'm not quite sure about when will their confidence getting back.
You mentioned, I think some of the venture capital from China mentioned to me earlier, and you also now say the same thing, that one of the things which is a big drawback is that since the travel is restricted, so how do you do due diligence? So we have Deepthi here from HSA. The question goes to him: is there any way that you can create virtual data rooms and do virtual due diligence so that these travel restrictions don't come in the way of investment opportunities for foreign investors, and also to receive this money which is so badly needed by our startup ecosystem? So is there any way that the legal community, the accounting community can get together, right, and come out with some kind of a virtual due diligence